This is the number we always play when people ask us to play more, because we know that after we play this, they couldn't possibly ever want to hear us again.
Ahmet Zappa, it's good to talk to you. Man, I've been a big fan of your father and the family for many, many years, going back
Good.
a long time.
All right. You're not kidding. All right. I like this.
So I've got to squeeze everything into about 15 minutes, but it's going to be fantastic.
I'll talk fast.
Yeah. This documentary is absolutely amazing. I was blown away with The Vault. We saw all the tapes in the room.
Yeah.
Has every one of those tapes been digitized?
No, we're probably about, at this point, maybe 35% through the tapes. That's should give you an idea of just how vast the vault is. We have 100 plus releases, and on each release there might be a few master tapes that we're going through. So it's a really a vast amount of media that my father did in his lifetime. It's extraordinary. Thousands upon thousands, tens of thousands of tapes.
And there's some remarkable gems in that collection that we saw a bit of in the documentary. There's complete tapes with sessions with Eric Clapton. There's complete tapes with sessions with John Lennon. I think some of the Lennon stuff came out on the Sometime in New York City album, but is there a wider collection of unreleased John Lennon and Eric Clapton that one day the world will get to hear?
Maybe. I would say in those instances that you're referring to, that Frank and John, that's from a night where they played a show, and that's what that's in reference to. And the Eric Clapton tapes is them hanging out and jamming in I want to say in New York, but it could, if memory serves, it was either New York or London, just them hanging out and having conversations, and Frank's playing lead, and then Eric is soloing, and then they kind of flip flop. So those are pretty awesome. So we find those kinds of nuggets here or there. I don't know if there's more specifically of another collaboration with John or another collaboration with Eric. I can say personally, the one that we haven't found yet, but I heard my mother and father talk about, is Frank and Jimi Hendrix jamming in the garden. So I've always wanted to hear what that sounded like. And Frank was someone who always had either a tape machine going or a video camera going, and so it's just extraordinary that everybody has a cell phone in their pocket that can record high def video now. But you had to pay someone. It was a costly endeavor, and he was just always documenting, and obviously a lot of that stuff influenced his music. But yeah, he'd curate through the best of it, or through some of the odder things. I don't want to say the best of it. He'd just curate specific slices of things that inspired him, and put it out. Because we discover amazing, kick-ass audio all the time. Some concerts that we have the multi-tracks on. Some might be a board tape. Others might be stuff from sessions that we didn't know that we had. That you might find like from Whitney Studios or something, when he was recording Hot Rats. Like something didn't go onto the Hot Rats record, but you're like, oh, what is this song? All of a sudden, I'm making it up. I'm using that as an example. We find things like that, and what we try to do is to be completists, and like it's archaeology, try to bring context to, okay, he recorded it here, what might this have been a part of? And we always try to listen to the fan base and do some pretty special packages to bring out great new material that hopefully people will enjoy.
I was particularly interested in the Beatles thread that you actually sort of see underlining through this documentary, starting with We're Only in It for the Money, Sgt. Pepper, but then it gets to working with John, working with Ringo, And also there was a Zappa label, I believe, at one point as well, wasn't there?
Yeah. I as someone who wasn't really paying attention to any of those kinds of stories and the gravitas or how cool it is as a fanboy of loving the Beatles and loving a lot of different music. And then, when I look back on it now as someone who appreciates everything, it's pretty cool. The kind of man and musician my father was, and the relationships that he had. And, I like that they mutually inspired one another, specifically the Beatles, my dad, and what they were doing. And I think the Beatles got a little more experimental. I think I don't know the exact quotes, but I know that they've referenced that, Frank was an influence, and I think there was just a lot of love between. At that time, people were really inventing music. They were they're breaking new ground, So also I love that when you think about the Beatles and Eric Clapton and a lot of these guys, their references, what they grew up listening to, was very similar music to Frank, but they all kind of went in different directions. So I think they had that relationship, which is unique moving forward. There's so much music that you can be inspired by now, but it was so limited back then to where people, I think, were a little more creative and inventive. But they all started in doo-wop and rock and roll, and they had all that in common, which is awesome. My dad was just a massive doo-wop fan.
There's so much genius in the experimentation of the music. Now, as a point of reference, I'm 62 years old now. When I was 15 years old at school, we studied this album, Weasels Rip My Flesh. Wow. In particular, the track on here, Prelude to the Afternoon of a Sexually Aroused Gas Mask.
Wow. I mean, that's a great school that you went to. That's amazing.
How's that for growing up as a teenage boy in Australia?
That's as close as you can get to growing up in my house.
Yeah. Well, I think that probably started, my longevity with studying Frank over the years. And I do particularly remember one night, me and my wife, we went to an Austin Powers movie. It was packed. It was opening night, the second one, I think. And that line from Moon Unit Alpha to Moon Unit Zappa, in a packed cinema, there were 2 laughs out loud in the entire cinema because no one else got it.
Those are like delightful moments. It's so meta to watch a movie that you're going to laugh at with, amazing comedians, and to have a reference like that pop up. Those are always good feelings. So I laughed just like you. I don't think that most people got that joke. I was the only other person kind of like hitting my friends like, that was fucking awesome. Oh, I don't know if I can swear. Sorry.
Yeah. That's funny. Moon Unit, of course, had that. Valley Girl was a played song on radio here. We'd just had FM radio begin in Australia around that time, and that was one of those alternative songs that FM radio needed to make a point of difference with AM radio at the time. And Valley Girl actually did take off. But I've actually been to that mall in the Valley now. So, I've actually been down to ground zero where the essence of that song actually took place. Tell me about that area and growing up there.
Oh, it's not the same. That mall, it's still a mall, but they demolished it and built a different kind of structure there. It's more like office buildings with a few shops now. But it was a big deal going to the Sherman Oaks Galleria, back in the day. So much has changed in California. Weirdly, I think the dialogue and the way that teenagers are speaking now or feel reminiscent of what was happening as I remember it in the early 80s, and the character my sister created and the way that she talked. It's like it's all come back around. The fashions come back around. And it's funny that you bring up Valley Girl, I just recently, pulling tapes. There's a whole other, my sister was improvising so much of uh, the conversation, right? And there was a whole alternative verses and things that are hilarious, and so kind of that's part of the fun archaeology of what I get to do is I hear these things that maybe someday they'll see the light of day, but it's just coincidental that you bring up Valley Girl, and that we were listening to some again alt versions of that track. But I'm curious, when that song came out in Australia, I'm trying to think, like, what does an Australian accent mixed with a Valley Girl accent sound like, and were people doing it?
Well, yeah, they were sort of trying to imitate it, but, it's as far removed from an Australian accent as you could possibly find. But I think it was the colloquialisms, what they were saying in there that sort of started to leak into some of the Australian conversation at the time, which was quite funny. The other song that was played on the radio at the time was Dancin' Fool from the Shake Your Booty album.
Awesome.
Yeah, that was... So for one small moment in time, Frank was a pop star.
Well, I guess in Australia, I don't ever feel like I have memories of it feeling like that in California. I mean, there's people had a lot of respect for my dad and they'd go to his shows, but it always felt different. The people that my father would hang out with, everyone came to our house. There wasn't a lot of, hey, we're going to go to some of the rock stars home. I don't think I ever did that even once. Everything kind of came to our home, which was like this family compound, where Frank would work in the studio all throughout the night, breakfast for dinner, dinner for breakfast. But it would be science-minded people. We'd have, Jet Propulsion Laboratories. I love. There's a guy who's a good friend of my dad's and stayed a friend after he passed. Bob Truhaft made a huge impact on my life, just being a resource to talk about science and what's really happening and technology. And my dad would have friends like that where they were talking about things other than music, but how are they pushing new technologies forward, and then the touch points between, I don't know, JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratories, and like a new way to record music or sound or life out in outer space, because weirdly, my mother, her father was at Area 51. So UFOs and things like that were a big topic in our household. My dad wrote about it.
Frank's father, of course, worked in a chemical plant, didn't he?
Yeah.
Frank, dying at an early age, did the cancer come from the fact that he grew up around a chemical plant, or was that as a result of the smoking from years?
I think because he was born in Baltimore and he had really bad ulcers, and I guess the environment of Baltimore was not too. It was just, it worried his family. And I think that was a big decision as to why they wanted to move to California. But before that, the way that they would treat ulcers is they would stick radioactive isotopes down into your stomach, I guess, to burn the ulcers, or I don't know. But when I heard that, it's like, that can't be good for you. And if they would do that to him on a regular basis, then I don't know, maybe that was something that, mutated or had a carcinogenic effect on his life later on, and furthered the cancer. But certainly the smoking, he chain smoked. His favorite vegetable was a cigarette. He drank a lot of coffee, and just had a lot of sex. So those were his vices.
He put a lot of living into those 52 years.
He did. It's extraordinary. I mean, bands, legacy artists like the Stones, and pick bands that were, I guess, his contemporaries. They're still making music, and my father made more albums in his lifetime than a lot of these artists have. In 52 years, he put out 60 some odd records, right? And since he's passed, he finished other records that we released after his passing, and he'd started all these projects. We're past 100 some odd releases, and again, in our vault, we have an my kids' could be putting out Zappa records, probably 3 a year for 50 years.
I think just in wrapping up, my favourite quote from Frank was, "Rock journalism is people who can't write, interviewing people who can't talk for people who can't read."
I think that's a fair statement. Sums it up.
It sums up my life.
Yeah, doesn't that feel good? Yeah. I mean, my father definitely had a way with words, and he's a funny guy, and he's a political genius, a big hugger. He was really a sweet man too. I mean, in the doc, the version I see is more when you see him in Prague, like rubbing noses with babies and giving people hugs and stuff. He was really warm, and he was so present with me and I think all of us when we had him, when he wasn't touring. He was a great father, and all my friends loved him, and he was, was the best. It's a total shame that he died so early. And I hope people do enjoy the doc, because I think there's a lot to unpack and understand. My father was pretty unique, and I love you, Paul, for being a fan, and I love you for taking the time to even chat with me. And I hope you like the film.
I absolutely love the film. We could have a whole other conversation just about you and the things that you do and the work you've done in movies and Disney, and that's for a whole other conversation.
Some other time. We live in a world where you can just ping me on Zoom. So see you next time. But I'd like to consider you my new Australian friend. So I love Australia. I cried when I saw the platypus for the first time in real time. It was kind of amazing. I fantasize about moving to Australia, by the way, if you'll have me.
Well, you probably picked a good time to come down here, because I wouldn't want to be over there.
Yeah, good point.
Ahmet Zappa, it's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Likewise. Thank you so much. Be safe, everyone. Don't be a COVID idiot. Do the right thing. See ya.